In a significant development that has the potential to reshape international relations and economic dynamics, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink recently spearheaded a $22.8 billion deal that grants a consortium led by the investment giant control over two critical ports at either end of the Panama Canal. This transaction has reportedly not only delighted former President Donald Trump but has also incited considerable discontent within the Chinese government, complicating the already fraught U.S China relationship. According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, the deal involves the acquisition of ports currently owned by the Hong Kong conglomerate CK Hutchison, which is controlled by the family of billionaire Li Ka-shing. Notably, CK Hutchison did not seek the necessary pre-approval from Chinese authorities before proceeding with the sale, a move that has sparked outrage in Beijing. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng in recent discussions expressed his discontent, indicating that the ports were intended to serve as leverage in ongoing negotiations with the Trump administration. He noted that the deal could hinder Chinese shipping operations and accused CK Hutchison of prioritizing profit over national interests. The ramifications of this deal could be significant. Chinese state media, including the pro-Beijing outlet Ta Kung Pao, has raised alarms about potential restrictions that Chinese vessels might face while transiting the canal. The sentiment expressed by Hong Kong's leader John Lee, who deemed the situation deserving of serious attention, underscores the anxiety brewing within China regarding the implications of this acquisition. Fink's outreach to the White House was motivated by Trump's public statements about reclaiming control of the Panama Canal. He argued that a negotiated purchase would mitigate the need for any aggressive actions that might be perceived as a threat. Trump has made it clear that he sees the canal as a critical component of U.S. interests, reiterating his intent to take it back during a recent address to Congress. The deal, however, is not yet finalized and is subject to regulatory approvals, with Chinese authorities reportedly scrutinizing it for potential security and antitrust violations. Analysts such as CFRA's Kathy Seifert suggest that if the deal collapses, it could negatively impact BlackRock's stock prices and raise questions about the credibility of its infrastructure division, which is in the midst of significant expansion. Amid this backdrop, U.S. China relations remain tense, marked by tariffs and trade disputes. In a parallel development, Senator Steve Daines of Montana has positioned himself as an intermediary between the two nations. Daines recently met with Chinese officials advocating for dialogue and emphasizing the need to address the fentanyl crisis, which has been a contentious issue between the U.S. and China. His efforts, however, come at a time when high-level communication between the two nations has been sparse, leading to concerns in Beijing about the sincerity of U.S. intentions. As both sides navigate these turbulent waters, the stakes are high. The potential fallout from the Panama Canal deal, coupled with ongoing tensions over tariffs and trade practices, could significantly alter the landscape of U.S.-China relations. Analysts observe that there exists a narrow window for engagement before additional tariffs could be imposed, and the outcomes of these discussions will likely shape the course of future diplomatic interactions. In conclusion, as BlackRock's ambitious deal unfolds and the geopolitical chess game between the U.S. and China continues, the international community watches closely. The repercussions of these developments may not only impact economic ties but could also redefine how global powers interact with one another in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining whether dialogue can prevail over discord in this high-stakes arena. In a rapidly evolving global landscape, China's economic and political strategies are increasingly scrutinized, particularly in light of its recent fiscal challenges and the continuing tensions with the United States. As the Chinese government grapples with declining tax revenues and rising trade tensions, the implications for its domestic policies and international relations are profound. Recent reports indicate that China's tax revenue has dropped significantly, revealing a concerning trend for the national government. According to the New York Times, tax revenue fell by 3.4% last year, a stark contrast to the 5% economic growth reported by official statistics once adjusted for deflation. This revenue decline is particularly troubling as it hampers the government's ability to address pressing economic issues, including a housing market crash and the financial struggles of local governments. As Keith Bradshaw, the Beijing bureau chief, notes, this fiscal shortfall limits Beijing's capacity to support the export industries that are vital to economic growth, especially in the face of the 20% tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. The reasons behind this revenue decline are multifaceted. A significant factor is deflation, which has led to lower producer prices and diminished corporate profits. The Chinese government, which traditionally relied on robust tax revenues to fund infrastructure projects and social programs, now faces difficulties in maintaining its spending levels. Bradshaw highlights that until recently the government enjoyed a steady influx of tax revenue, which has now become a rarity due to the economic slowdown and declining consumer spending. Moreover, the government's attempts to stimulate the economy through increased spending have faltered, largely due to Xi Jinping's caution against what he perceives as excessive welfare programs. Despite repeated promises to boost consumer spending through enhanced social security measures, the government has yet to provide significant financial support. This reluctance may stem from an acute awareness of its dwindling fiscal resources, as underscored by the recent budget, which indicates an increasing budget deficit projected to reach 4% of GDP. Meanwhile, trade relations with the United States remain a focal point of concern. As reported by McDuffie Progress, Chinese officials have welcomed visits from U.S. lawmakers, including Senator Steve Daines, who plans to address trade tensions and the issue of fentanyl smuggling during his trip. The ongoing dialogue between U.S. and Chinese officials underscores the complexities of their economic relationship, particularly as both sides navigate the fallout from tariffs and trade imbalances. As President Trump continues to ramp up tariffs, citing the need to rectify trade imbalances and combat illicit drug trafficking, China's response has been cautious yet strategic. The government's recent statements suggest a desire to stabilize relations with the U.S. while simultaneously addressing its domestic economic challenges. Analysts predict that without significant changes in fiscal policy or trade strategy, China may face further economic strain that could jeopardize its long-term growth prospects. Looking ahead, the trajectory of China's economy and its relationship with the United States will likely remain intertwined. As both nations grapple with their respective challenges, the outcomes of ongoing discussions and policy decisions will shape not only their bilateral relations but also the broader global economic landscape. The interplay of domestic fiscal health and international trade dynamics will be crucial as China seeks to maintain its growth amid rising pressures both at home and abroad. In a troubling economic landscape, China is grappling with a significant decline in tax revenue, a situation that exacerbates the already precarious state of its economy as it navigates the challenges posed by renewed tariffs from the United States. As President Trump imposes a 20% tariff on Chinese goods and threatens further economic sanctions, Beijing finds itself with diminishing financial resources to support its exporters and consumers, both of whom are feeling the pinch of an economic slowdown. Recent reports reveal that China's tax revenue fell by 3.4% last year, a stark contrast to the 5% growth recorded in the overall economy adjusted for deflation. This decline marks the most significant drop in decades, with previous downturns occurring only under extraordinary circumstances such as the nationwide lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic. The current situation, however, points to a deeper malaise. Deflation is causing prices to drop broadly, resulting in decreased revenue for both the state and companies, leaving them struggling to meet their debt obligations. Beijing's difficulty in mustering the funds needed to stimulate the economy comes at a time when many economists are urging the government to increase social spending to support the beleaguered consumer base. Despite repeated promises from Chinese officials to implement measures such as enhanced pensions and unemployment benefits, concrete actions have been lacking. Analysts attribute this hesitancy partly to President Xi Jinping's long-standing aversion to what he terms overboard social security measures, which he believes could lead to a dependency on welfare. The implications of falling tax revenue are profound. With a projected budget deficit rising to 4% of GDP, up from nearly 3%, many economists believe the actual deficit could be even larger when considering the government's borrowing practices. Jeremy Zucca, director at Fitch Ratings, noted that deficits are quite high and debt is rising quite quickly, so they are fiscally challenged. The situation is exacerbated at the local government level, where revenues from land sales have plummeted due to a crashing housing market, further limiting their ability to fund essential services such as pensions and healthcare. Fitch's analysis highlights that total revenue from national and local governments has dropped from 29% of economic output in 2018 to a projected 21.1% in 2025. Significant portions of this decline stem from a decrease in revenue from land sales and a downturn in tax collections, particularly in value-added taxes. These taxes, akin to sales taxes, fell short of expectations by 7.9% last year, reflecting a broader trend of weakening consumer spending. As China faces mounting economic pressures, the government must also contend with the effects of its own tariffs on imports, which have led to a decline in customs duties revenue by 9.2% as consumers grappling with reduced income and wealth due to the housing crash cut back on imports. The broader economic landscape is further complicated by stagnant salaries and rising unemployment, which have led to a significant shortfall in personal income tax collections. Looking ahead, the financial outlook for China remains uncertain. The government's budget for 2025 relies on optimistic projections regarding tax revenue and economic performance assumptions that many analysts argue are overly optimistic given the current trajectory of the economy. With consumers increasingly cautious and local governments struggling to meet their obligations, Beijing's ability to implement effective economic measures remains in jeopardy. The challenges presented by declining tax revenues, coupled with external pressures from U.S. tariffs, place China in a precarious position as it seeks to stabilize its economy. As the government continues to navigate these turbulent waters, future developments will be closely watched, particularly how it balances the need for fiscal stimulus against the backdrop of its broader economic strategies and political imperatives. The evolving relationship between China and the U.S. will also play a critical role in shaping the economic landscape in the coming months, underscoring the interconnectedness of global trade and domestic fiscal health. In a landscape marked by geopolitical tension and economic uncertainty, former President Donald Trump's approach to U.S. relations with Indo-Pacific allies has left many in the region on edge. Following his return to the political spotlight, Trump's trade and security policies have raised questions not only about America's commitment to its long-standing allies but also about the potential ramifications for regional stability. During his presidency, Trump frequently undermined trust among key international partners, a trend that appears to be continuing in his current term. As the United States navigates its complex relationships with countries like South Korea, Japan, and Australia, Trump's administration's aggressive stance on trade, particularly with China, has created a precarious environment for diplomacy in the Indo-Pacific. The imposition of tariffs on steel and aluminum from Australia, threats of tariffs on Japanese automobiles, and the looming possibility of sanctions against South Korea have all contributed to an atmosphere of uncertainty. According to Seth Jones, president of the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, such actions could force U.S. partners to reassess their reliance on American security commitments. The situation is further complicated by the ongoing trade war with China, which Trump initiated during his first term. His administration's inconsistent messaging has left allies feeling vulnerable, particularly as they engage in critical strategic alliances aimed at countering potential aggression from Beijing and Pyongyang. The Biden administration sought to stabilize these relationships by strengthening security agreements with Japan and South Korea, as well as forming new strategic pacts with Australia and the UK. However, Trump's return to the political arena has reignited fears that these alliances may be undermined once again. As regional leaders grapple with their own domestic challenges, South Korea facing a constitutional crisis and Japan undergoing a leadership transition, there is a palpable sense of anxiety regarding U.S. reliability. Experts like John Nielsen Wright from the University of Cambridge note that an escalation of tariffs in the Indo-Pacific could mirror the tit-for-tat disputes seen in North America and Europe, further destabilizing the region. In a striking illustration of the complexities surrounding U.S. foreign policy, Trump's recent comments regarding Elon Musk highlight potential conflicts of interest that could further complicate national security matters. While discussing Musk's ties to China, Trump asserted that the billionaire should not have access to sensitive military plans given his substantial business interests in China. Despite this, Trump has also praised Musk's contributions to the U.S. military-industrial complex, raising questions about the blurred lines between business and defense. The ramifications of this situation extend to the domestic policies of U.S. allies as well. For instance, South Korea's government has been proactive in securing defense funding agreements with the U.S. to mitigate the risk of renewed pressure from Washington. This responsiveness is indicative of the heightened concerns surrounding American military commitments, particularly in light of Trump's past insinuations that he might withdraw U.S. troops stationed in the region. The evolving dynamics in the Indo-Pacific are reflective of a broader uncertainty about U.S. intentions and reliability. Allies are increasingly looking for assurances from Washington as they navigate their own security concerns, especially with China's growing influence. As these nations seek stability in both trade and security relations with the U.S., the implications of Trump's policies will likely reverberate throughout the region. With the geopolitical landscape continually shifting, the future of U.S. Indo-Pacific relations remains in flux. As regional partners strive to solidify their security frameworks amidst uncertainty, the effectiveness of Trump's foreign policy approach will undoubtedly be scrutinized in the coming months. The hope among U.S. allies is for a consistent and reliable partnership that not only reinforces trade ties but also provides a robust security umbrella in an increasingly volatile environment. As tensions rise and alliances are tested, the need for clear and stable U.S. leadership has never been more critical. As the diplomatic landscape between the United States and China continues to evolve, the anticipated meeting between former President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping raises critical questions about the future of their bilateral relations. With tensions simmering over trade, Taiwan, and broader geopolitical issues, China has made it clear that it expects more than just a diplomatic performance from Trump. Instead, sincere dialogue and concrete actions are necessary for any meaningful progress. In the context of an ongoing trade war, Trump's administration has implemented a series of tariffs, including a significant 20% levy on all Chinese imports, which he framed as part of his America First agenda. The tariffs were aimed at rebalancing trade relations and curbing the flow of illicit substances like fentanyl. However, this approach has sparked retaliatory measures from China, which has accused the U.S. of undermining fair trade principles. The economic strain resulting from these tariffs has affected both nations, leading to a complex web of retaliatory tariffs and heightened tensions. China's response to Trump's policies has not only been economic but strategic as well. The tariffs symbolize Trump's unpredictable nature, creating an environment where trust is hard to come by. As Xi prepares for the potential meeting with Trump, he will expect tangible commitments to lift tariffs and restore a more balanced trade relationship. Anything less may be interpreted as a continuation of adversarial tactics, deepening the trust deficit between the two countries. The situation is further complicated by the contentious issue of Taiwan. For China, Taiwan is an inseparable part of its territory, while the U.S. has increasingly supported the self-governing island through arms sales and diplomatic overtures. Trump's inconsistent approach to Taiwan has only heightened tensions, leaving China wary of U.S. intentions. She is likely to demand assurances from Trump that the U.S. will adhere to the One China policy and refrain from actions that could provoke further conflict over Taiwan. The lack of effective communication channels exacerbates the challenges in U.S.-China relations. Trump's unilateralism and disregard for traditional diplomatic methods have left Beijing feeling frustrated and uncertain. Despite China's overtures for dialogue, including invitations for U.S. officials to engage in discussions, little progress has been made. This lack of meaningful exchanges has been partly attributed to the hawkish stance of key figures in Trump's administration, making it difficult for China to gauge whether its messages are being effectively conveyed to the president. As the two leaders prepare to meet, the stakes are high. She seeks to engage in substantive discussions about trade, technology, and security issues that have long been sources of contention. The looming threats of additional tariffs from Trump add pressure to the situation, with China acutely aware that any further escalation could derail the possibility of progress. She is unlikely to engage in talks merely for show. He expects reciprocity and a genuine commitment from Trump to listen, compromise, and act in good faith. Failure to establish a constructive dialogue could have dire implications not only for U.S.-China relations but also for global stability. A breakdown in negotiations would exacerbate economic divides and increase the risk of military confrontations, particularly over Taiwan. For Xi, the outcome of this meeting could ultimately influence China's sovereignty and its standing on the global stage. The anticipated visit is a litmus test for Trump's leadership. Will he set aside his adversarial tendencies and strive for constructive engagement with China? Or will he continue down a path of isolationism and confrontation? The answer may determine not just the trajectory of U.S.-China relations but also the broader geopolitical landscape moving forward. With China expecting sincerity and a genuine effort to address the issues at hand, the world watches to see if this meeting will be a turning point in their fraught relationship or yet another missed opportunity.